Good morning, guys. It's Casey with Our Country Designs, and today I'm going to be showing you how to glaze furniture. So this is a dresser that I've been working on for some time now. It's been slow going, but what we have here is we did 2 coats of primer. We did antique white from General Finishes milk paint line, and then we put a top coat of General Finishes high performance over the top, and that was the last layer we did. So you in general are gonna want to put a top coat between your base color and the glaze that you choose. The reasoning behind that is that if you don't, then the glaze color really soaks into the base color. So this white wouldn't just, the actual color of the white paint would start to kind of brownish, because I'm gonna be using a brown glaze, as opposed to more sitting on top of it and giving it a streaky look. It would change the whole color of the paint. Unless you're a really quick worker, some people can work around that. But if you are definitely early starting out, or you just like to work it, it's gonna give you more time to work the glaze and get the glaze where you want the glaze to be, rather than it settling in too quickly. So generally I use a foam brush, but I've run out of those. So if you just have one of those cheap craft foam brushes, that's all you need. But I'm gonna be using one of my Worcester paint brushes today because that's what I have. And then we're gonna be using General Finishes Glaze. Their Glaze Effects, I have the cover off already. So this is a Van Dyke brown glaze. This has been a really popular color for us over the top of this antique white. It gives it a really antique-y look to it. And then you're gonna want an old rag that is slightly damp, okay? Because once we put the glaze on, we're gonna wipe it off, and by having a damp rag, it's gonna help you work it a little bit more. If you don't have a damp rag, as it dries, it gets harder to work, and the glaze dries pretty quickly. So you wanna be sure that you have a damp rag. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna just dip our brush in, and I'm gonna paint the entire surface of this dresser drawer. So if you can tell, this is just a dresser, the drawer of a dresser. There's a lot of detail in this piece, and we're gonna see how the glaze is gonna help pull all of that out. So there's nothing fancy about how you put it on. You do still, even with this top coat, wanna work relatively quickly. You're gonna work in sections when you're on a bigger piece. So when I paint glaze the main dresser, I'm gonna work it in sections so that I'm not doing the whole thing all at one time. Otherwise, once it dries, it gets hard to do much with it. The nice thing is that a lot of times you can almost buff it off once it dries if you don't like the look, or you can just start over and repaint the whole piece if you really don't like it. Hopefully that doesn't happen for you. So it looks super sloppy, not so pretty right now. That's okay. You want to be sure you get it into all of these crevices and stuff, because that's kind of a lot of times the point of this glaze, is that you're wanting to pull those details out. So you're going to start from one side to the other, so you can't see the whole frame. But you'll see that as I come across, I'm wiping off almost all of it, and we're gonna keep wiping as we go. And you just wanna wipe in straight lines. And it depends on how heavy you want the look. If you're going for a really heavy, distressed look, you'll leave some more glaze on. If you're looking for more of just background accenting, then you're gonna take most of it off, which I generally take most of it off. I just like a little bit of accent. And then I'm gonna go in and just clean these up just a little bit, and then I'll go back over. I think there's this, it's a little too watery for what I like, so I'm just gonna go in and kind of dab these areas. I like it to have a heavy look, but I don't want it to look like it was done on purpose. And if you have goopy, watery glaze inside of your cracks, it's not gonna quite look as natural. All right, and then I'm just gonna go back over it again. So you can see in some areas it's gonna pull it out a lot more, other areas not so much. And that's good. The thing that I had the hardest with glaze early on was that I wanted it to just look perfect. Had it be completely even everywhere and all of that, but in reality I had to come to terms with that's not the purpose of glaze. Glaze is not meant for the piece to look uniform and perfect. It's meant to add character and definition, and that doesn't include perfection. So you're just going to keep going back and forth. You want to go all the way across. If you don't go all the way across, it's not going to give you a good, you're going to start to see some streaking. All right, and I like how that's looking. Then I normally don't even go back and put too much on the edges because a lot of times, which there might not be quite yet, a lot of times after I do a couple drawers, or you find the right spot on your towel, if you just rub onto the upper edges, there's enough on your towel to give the accent for the top of the drawer here. Otherwise, you can just go back and add a little bit. All right, so that one is done. We are going to move on to the next one. I'll do it again to show you one more time. I'm just gonna dab some of these spots a little bit. The glaze is like a really, really watery paint. So it pools sometimes, which if you're going for a really, really heavy distressed look, that's gonna look really nice. But I like it to be, like I said, a little bit more subtle. All right, so we're gonna move this one aside. We'll do one more. Move this one this way a little bit more so you can see full frame kind of how we start and end on the edges. So again, we're just gonna paint it on, getting into all the crevices. You don't need a fancy brush to do this, just one of those cheap foam 50 centers. And then the top of this dresser is going to be stained in an espresso colored gel stain called Java Gel, which is also General Finishes brand. So that's gonna help pull together all of this. It's gonna look really nice. I've done one other dresser in these colors before and it sold very quickly with a lot of interest, so it's hot colors right now. All right, so again, you're gonna start on one end, basically off the edge completely, and you're gonna just wipe. Now don't push too hard. If you push too hard, you're gonna take off too much too quickly, and then you might have to go back and add more. It's better to do a couple light strokes, so you make sure you're not over taking it off, than having to go back and try to add some. Because if you take off too much and go back to try to add some once the stuff that's already on there is dry, it can be a little finicky. All right, so then again, I'm gonna go back into these and just kind of, I don't wanna take a ton out, so more or less just kind of dabbing it out. Because I don't want it all gone, but I wanna dull it down a little bit. These are really deep crevices on these. I think the hardest thing for me with doing the glazing, is getting the consistency on the sides of dressers, because it's such a large piece on the sides. And again, I always had a hard time in the beginning with wanting it to look perfect, that it made it difficult for me to get the lines to look straight and beautiful. but with practice it gets a little bit better. All right, and then we're just gonna go on the edges and see if there's enough, see if I can find a spot on my rig where there's just enough glaze kind of sitting on the surface. There's not really accenting we're trying to bring out here, so we just want it to match the color and not be a bright white, since that's not what the rest of it's looking like anymore. As it dries, once it's dry, you gotta be done. If you go back as it's starting to dry, which is relatively quickly, it's gonna start to frustrate you more than anything. So really, you've gotta do a couple swipes, you gotta be done with it, and you gotta be okay with the way that it looks, because otherwise, when I was in my perfection stages, I would just sit here frustrated forever because it would never look like what I was trying to go for, which was, again, perfection. And distressed looks is not perfection. It's about getting it to look like it's worn and stuff doesn't wear and tear and look beautiful evenly throughout the whole piece as it ages. So this is how you kind of do the glazing. Actually, we'll show you the side of the dresser as well, because this dresser's got some unique. Let me just move everything around. All right. So again, this has the base of the antique white on it, and the top coat of General Finishes High Performance, and then we will add in our glaze. So start from the top. This isn't too big of a side of a dresser. I'm just gonna try to work relatively quickly. Now this is a refinished dresser. It's an old dresser, so there's a lot of like little nicks in it that we didn't sand out. And we definitely don't do that on pieces that we're gonna glaze, because those little pieces are gonna come out and look really cool, because the glaze will help accent them, which will help bring out more of an aged look. Actually, I might do it section by section here. I'm going to paint this middle piece, and then I'm going to go and get this first half kind of done. Because remember, it's going to dry relatively quickly, especially if you don't have the wet cloth. So you're going to start all the way up at top and just pull down. And I'm going to go through and do that all the way here in these areas to get off the most of it, and then I'll go back and kind of doing the touching up of it. And you want to go in the way that the wood grain goes. So these panels go down, and this bottom panel and the top panel go across. All right, so then I'm going to go back and do a little bit of my touching up to get it to be the look that I'm going for. Again, I'm not going for a super heavy look, so I'm going to take off a lot of this. And you might feel, probably not, it's a little far away. I'll zoom in a bit. These little knots are getting filled in, which are the little dents and stuff that just comes with the old piece of the dresser. The hardest thing with these indents is that you'll get a lot of kind of streaking from where you're starting and stopping with your towel. So it can be a little bit of finicky with that. You just got to learn to kind of blend it a little bit, really lightly touching those areas up with your wet towel or wet rag. Come back down one more time here. I'm going to do a little bit of touching up here. All right, and then in these corners and such, you're going to get a little bit more heavy for the glazing, but that again adds to the look. If you don't like that, you can go in and take like a knife with your cloth and try to get some of that out, but that's part of adding to that age look. Okay, so I'm going to do the other half and then I will post pictures afterwards, but let me show you. You can kind of see here that it kind of fills in some of these dots and imperfections, if we can see down here. Then you're kind of getting it into the corners and stuff here, which is really nice. And it's quite the difference. So you can see kind of up close the paneling here that has the glaze on it, and then this is a stark white next to it. So it is gonna change the color of the dresser, but it's a nice color change. Definitely adds to the uniqueness of it and the antique-y look. All right, ask us any questions if you have them. We're happy to answer. Otherwise, we'll see you until next time.